in this section, you need to know the Pythagorean theorem formula, which is if you add the two short sides of a right triangle and square them, it is equal to the hypotenuse squared. The distance formula between 2 points x1, y1, and x2, y2. And the midpoint formula, which is the center of a segment. So the distance is the length between 2 points, distance between 2 points. The midpoint of this is the center between 2 points. And the Pythagorean theorem will give you the sides of a right triangle. So right here, I'm going to label this side's going to be A, this is B, and the hypotenuse is C. So I'm going to do x squared plus 8 squared equals 10 squared. X squared plus 64 equals 100. Subtract 64 from each side. X squared equals 36. Take the square root. Therefore, x has to equal 6. So this side has to be a 6. The distance formula, this is going to be my x1, y1, x2, y2, and then I carefully plug it in. So the distance equals the square root of, subtract the x's, -1 minus 5 squared, plus, subtract the y's, go in the same order, 3 minus 7 squared. You'll never get a negative distance. It will always be positive because you're squaring numbers. So it's -6 squared right here is 36. This is -4 squared is positive 16. So the answer is a positive square root of 52. You can also put in your calculator around. And to find the midpoint over here, again, you label it x1, y1, x2, y2, and you're trying to get an ordered pair, an x and a y. So you're going to add up the x's, so -7 plus -1 is -8. Take half of it. You're basically averaging the x's and you average out the y's. So 2 plus -10 is -8 again. So simplify this, your midpoint is at -4, -4. Okay, the next couple examples is you're trying to find the midpoint. So I already wrote down the formula, and now I'm going to substitute these in x1, y1, x2, y2. So it's going to be average out the x's. 8 plus -6 is 2 divided by 2. 9 plus -3 is 6 divided by 2. I'm dividing by 2 right here because that's my formula. So it simplifies to be 1, 3. It's a coordinate for the midpoint. The second one's trickier because it gives you that the midpoint is -1, 5. So this is your average of the x. This is the average of the y's. But it's also giving you another point. I let that point be x2 and y2 over here. Well, this should have been, x2 and y2 right here. Change that to a 4. Okay. So, now I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So I have -2 equals x1 plus 1. Multiply both sides by 2 over here. You're not going to multiply the numerator by 2 because these two will cancel out. And you'll have 10 equals y1 plus 4. So in the end, when you subtract 1 right over here, your x1 is equal to -3, and your y1 is equal to 6. So I'm going to write it nicer, -3, 6. So this is the other point. You have the point D right up here, and you have the point G, and the midpoint has to be -1, 5. So you work backwards. And the third one is find the distance between the two. So I plug in, notice how it doesn't matter if you have x2 minus x1 or y2 minus y1 or x1 minus x2 or y1 minus y2. It's kind of like slope. So I'm going to do 5 minus negative 2 squared plus 6 minus negative 4 squared, all underneath the square root. So right here I have 7 squared, which is 49, plus 10 squared, which is 100, all underneath the square root. So the answer is the square root of 149. Okay, to find the two different ways, you can do the distance formula, which I just did on the last page, so try to do the distance between the two, distance formula, but I'm going to show in this example explanation is by doing the Pythagorean theorem. So what I do is I make a right triangle. Okay, I could have made a right triangle like the red, or I could make a right triangle like the purple. The distance is the hypotenuse. So if this is my A, this is my B, this is my C, I can do A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So the distance between here and here has to be 8 because this is negative 5 and this is 3. So it's 8 squared plus the B has to be, here's 4 and here's negative 2, so this has to be 2. This side has to be 6 equals C squared. So 64 plus 36 equals C squared. 100 equals C squared. C has to equal 10. And if I did the distance formula, C would also be 10. I drew a drawing on a coordinate of what's going on. So Torrey Road 2 miles north, then 5 miles west, and then 14 miles south. And it says, at the end of her ride, how far is she from her starting point? So you're trying to find this distance right here. So to me, I see a right triangle with, we're trying to find what C is. So this distance is 5. This distance is not 14. This is 14, but then you also have to take away the 2 that she already went up. So this has to be 12. So in the end, you're answering 12 squared plus 5 squared equals C squared. And when you calculate C, you end up getting 13 after you take the square root. Okay, A, B, and C are points given up here. AB means find the distance. Okay, remember if there's not a segment bar above there, it means the distance. So we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So I do D equals the square root of x1, which is 3, minus 0 squared plus y1, which is 8, minus a negative 4 squared. So D equals the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, plus, this is going to be a positive 12 because 8 minus negative 4 is 8 plus 4, 12 squared. So D equals the square root of 9 plus 144. So D equals the square root of 153. And down here, you're finding the midpoint. So you got to use the midpoint formula. So you average out the x's and then average out the y's. So if A is 3 and negative 5 for your x's, 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2, and you have to divide it by 2 because there's two numbers. Then you average your y's. 8 plus 6 is 14, divided by 2 to get the average. So the midpoint is negative 1, 7.